Hey everybody, today I want to tell you some more things about Moldova and talk about how it went when I visited again and decided to give Moldova a second chance. I apologize if you're sick of hearing me go on and on about Moldova. I know for sure my friends and family are. That's the reason I'm making this video, to reach out to the hundreds of millions of people who watch YouTube. I'm sure somebody out there is looking for more information about Moldova. Plus, it's my YouTube channel, and I still have things I want to say about Moldova. So let's get into it. The first time I visited Moldova, I hated it. It was in November of 2014, so over 10 years ago. Everything was cold and gray, really depressing. I was sick, coughing and sneezing all over. I was here with a tour group, and to make things worse, we stayed in this hostel in Chisinau that was awful. I can't remember the name of it. I hope it closed down or maybe got new owners. They didn't have enough beds for all of us, so our two tour guides had to sleep in chairs in the reception area. But over the past few years, I've heard people say it's gotten a lot better. And to be fair, a lot of the things that bothered me weren't really Moldova's fault. I was sick, the accommodations were gross, it was November, so I decided to try it again and give Moldova a second chance. You might be thinking, where exactly is Moldova? It's in Eastern Europe, sandwiched between Ukraine and Romania, with whom it shares a common language and culture. In fact, until 1940, Romania and Moldova were one country. Then, through a series of historical events, mostly World War II, Moldova became part of the Soviet Union, and Romania said, wait, hold my beer. You guys can keep Stalin, we're going to go get our own brutal dictator, Ceausescu. We'll save that story for a future video about Romania. Moldova regained its independence in 1991 and is hoping to join the European Union in 2030. Getting there is pretty easy. I flew into the airport in Chisinau. There's bus service from Romania. And if you're up for a little adventure, there's a classic Soviet overnight train from Bucharest to Chisinau. It's not fast, it's not that comfortable, but it is a very unique experience, which I'm planning to try out later this month, so I'll let you know how it goes. Now let's talk about money and SIM cards. I use an eSIM from a company called Arilo. They're not a sponsor, but I just happened to use theirs, and it worked fine most of the trip. Once you get to Tiraspol and Prednistrovie, it gets tricky. There's a chance your phone will only work on Wi-Fi while you're there. This is true for money as well. Bring some cash with you, euro or dollars, because there's a chance your ATM card's not going to work in Prednistrovie. In big cities like Chisinau, there are ATMs, so you'll be fine there. Even in Chisinau, I found it easier to exchange cash. There are money exchange places literally everywhere. I don't know what the deal is. They're on every corner, so you shouldn't have any problem. And for me, it was just a little easier to figure it out if I had some cash to exchange. Real quick, now that we've gone over the basics, if you're finding this information useful, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Moving on to where to stay. I've got 2 hotels to tell you about, and they're pretty much at opposite ends of the spectrum. If you're looking for a nice, normal, civilized hotel with an amazing breakfast buffet, the Radisson Blu. It's a fine hotel in a great location, and it has everything you would expect from a modern, respectable hotel chain. But if you're looking for a more authentic experience, the Hotel Chisinau offers a unique glimpse into a bygone era. During its heyday, the late 60s and 70s, Chisinau had 3 grand hotels, the Cosmos, the National, and the Hotel Chisinau. Of those, the Hotel Chisinau is the sole survivor, so that's why I recommend you stay at least one night here. It's not expensive, not fancy, and it's the real deal. After arriving in Chisinau, don't judge me, friends, hear me out, I joined a group tour. Because while it's possible to visit all the places we went on your own, in the interest of convenience, efficiency, and meeting other like-minded travelers, I went with a group. Plus, from my research, I knew that this particular tour company goes to a lot of off-the-beaten-path locations, which is exactly what I'm interested in. We spent a couple days exploring Chisinau, including an epic trek to the roof of the abandoned National Hotel to watch the sunset. Another highlight was driving a ways out of the city to visit a museum, I guess you'd call it, which was basically a quirky collection of antiques that an older gentleman had accumulated over the years. We also saw a lot of interesting mosaics along the way, and it turns out that these were just the tip of the iceberg, because as time went on, it became apparent that Moldova is a treasure trove of these. We saw them everywhere, on buildings, bus stops, train stations, you name it. A handful of the mosaics have been restored, but the others, unfortunately, are deteriorating year after year. After Chisinau, we traveled to the other must-see place in Moldova, Prednistrovie. This is the breakaway republic that feels like a Soviet time capsule. You may have heard it called Transnistria, but Prednistrovie is the preferred designation. The capital city is Tiraspol, and I highly recommend a visit. If you don't have a lot of time, it's easy to organize a day trip from Chisinau. Even though Prednistrovie isn't officially recognized as an independent country, it still feels very legit when you travel there. There are passport controls at the border, the menus and signage uses the Cyrillic alphabet, and they have their own banknotes and coins. And remember, like I mentioned before, have some dollars or euro handy to exchange. It'll make things a lot easier. If you're spending a couple days in Tiraspol, the Park Hotel is very nice and in a pretty location along the river. As a side note, when I visited in 2014, we stayed in the same hotel before it was renovated. It was called the Aist, A-I-S-T, which I believe is the Russian word for crane type of bird. And back then, I promise you, it was truly awful. Dark, dingy, no hot water in the rooms. Part of the hotel was some kind of casino or nightclub with all kinds of nefarious activities going on. It was quite the experience. But now it's fine. Completely redone, clean and bright, much improved. Now, if you take a walk along the river by the hotel, there's a very interesting ferry crossing. Be sure and walk over there and take a look. There's a large floating platform, big enough for a couple cars, people, bikes, whatever, and it's attached to a steel cable stretched across the river. When everyone is on the platform and situated, the operator unhooks the chain and the platform floats across the river. The operator guides it so it stays in alignment with the dock on the other side. It's very low tech, but it gets the job done. Other cool activities I recommend in Tiraspol: take a walk around the city and check out the Soviet architecture, Lenin statues, tank monuments, and this statue of a student in a robe, wearing glasses, with an owl, who is definitely not Harry Potter. And visit the local flea market, where you can find everything from flip phones to bootleg VCR tapes to military memorabilia. It's fascinating. Have a stroll around the park, and if you're lucky, you may be able to ride the old school Ferris wheel they have there. Take a tour of the brandy distillery called Kvint, and have lunch in a Soviet cafe. One of the best ones is called Back in the USSR. All right, moving on. After Tiraspol, our group drove to another city in Prednistrovie called Dubasari. Dubasari is quite a bit smaller than Tiraspol. It had some well-maintained buildings and public spaces worth seeing, like the local stadium. We spent the night here at a hotel I can best describe as being unintentionally quirky. After Dubasari, we exited out of Prednistrovie and headed north to Soroca. Along the way, we stopped to check out an enormous abandoned nuclear bunker known as Object 1180. It's a huge complex that was never completed. We had to hike a little ways through the forest to get there. It's huge, and not just what you can see on the surface. The structure continues 12 stories down into the ground. Over time, a lot of it is filled up with water, but still amazing to explore, and for me, one of the highlights of the trip. We left the abandoned bunker and made our way up to Soroca, which is right across the river from Ukraine. In fact, until the war started in 2022, there was actually a small border crossing here. You could take a little ferry across the river to get to Ukraine. The downtown area of Soroca is pretty basic, not too much to see. But the Riverwalk area and the restored 15th century fortress is beautiful, very picturesque. Okay, this has nothing to do with Moldova, but I just want to show you this cool car. Look at that, oh my gosh, super cool. Another reason people come to Soroca is to see the Roma neighborhood of extravagant and eccentric mansions. The mansions, many of them unfinished or abandoned, are modeled after other famous buildings, like European cathedrals or the US Capitol. Following Soroca, we headed back to Chisinau, where the tour ended. However, we did manage to squeeze in one more little adventure before we flew home. And that was a trip to see a private collection of Soviet statues and old planes on display in someone's field on the outskirts of Chisinau. A young lady on the tour had heard of this place and invited us to tag along. And I'm telling you, getting there was a heck of a quest. It was its own mini expedition. Our driver was nice, but he spoke no English, and didn't want to or didn't know how to follow the map on his phone. I guess he had a vague idea of how to get there and stopped several times along the way to ask random strangers for directions. Finally, in the middle of nowhere, down a bumpy gravel road, we arrived at this outdoor museum. The collection was very eclectic. A lady lived on site and she showed us around. Thankfully, the driver waited for us and took us back to the hotel after. What a day. So, to wrap things up, am I glad I gave Moldova a second chance? Definitely yes. Would I recommend it as a good tourist destination? Also yes, and here's why. When Moldova becomes part of the EU, a lot of its quirky charm might go away. So I would encourage you to visit soon while it still has that Wild West vibe. Because honestly, even if it's too unpolished and not your cup of tea, it's still a one-of-a-kind experience. And later, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you'll be able to tell your friends about how you visited Moldova while it was still crazy and rough around the edges. Okay, everyone, that's all I have to say about Moldova right now. Thanks a lot for watching. Subscribe for more crazy adventures. Cheers and happy travels.